I will never forget the weight of that gift box in my hands. A delicate gold chain with the name Theodore engraved in elegant script, nestled in blue velvet. I had spent 3 weeks choosing it, visiting 4 different jewelers until I found exactly the right one. It was my way of connecting my grandson to the grandfather he would never meet, to the man whose name he carried, to the love story that defined my entire life. I stood at the entrance of St. Catherine's Church on that crisp October morning, my heart beating so fast I could feel it in my throat. 47 days. That's how long it had been since I'd held my grandson. 47 days of excuses, of doors that were never quite open, of photos I could only see through Vivian's Instagram feed like some stranger looking in at my own family. The church was beautiful, filled with white flowers and soft morning light. I recognized so many faces from my years in this community. People who had watched Julian grow up. People who had supported me through Theodore's funeral in this very same church 26 years ago. This was supposed to be a day of joy, of welcoming little Theo into our family's faith tradition. I smoothed my cream-colored dress and took a deep breath. I had chosen my outfit carefully. Elegant, but not showy. Appropriate for a grandmother at her first grandchild's baptism. I wanted Vivian to have no reason to criticize me, no excuse to find fault. I had learned over the past 3 years that my daughter-in-law looked for reasons to push me away, so I tried to give her none. When I stepped through those heavy wooden doors, the first thing I saw was Julian at the altar. My son, my beautiful boy, now a 32-year-old man, holding his infant son in his arms. Little Theo was dressed in the same christening gown Julian had worn 3 decades ago, the one I had preserved in acid-free tissue paper all these years, hoping for exactly this moment. My eyes filled with tears immediately. Happy tears, grateful tears. And then I heard it. Vivian's voice, sharp and clear, cutting through the sacred silence of that holy place. She was standing near the front pew, leaning toward her sister Madison, but she made no effort to whisper, none at all. Seriously, she actually showed up. I told Julian to handle this. That old woman had to come and make everything about herself. My feet stopped moving. The gift box suddenly felt impossibly heavy. Madison glanced back at me, and I saw something that might have been pity in her eyes before she looked away. But Vivian wasn't finished. "Watch," she continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "She'll find some way to ruin the photos. She always does. I specifically told Julian I wanted this day to be perfect, and now we have to deal with her hovering around like she belongs here." I felt the blood drain from my face. Belongs here. As if I were an intruder at my own grandson's baptism. As if 32 years of raising Julian alone, of sacrificing everything to give him every opportunity, of building a business from nothing so he could become the man he is today, meant nothing at all. But the worst was yet to come. Vivian adjusted her designer dress, that perfect blonde hair catching the light from the stained glass windows, and said the words that would echo in my mind for weeks. "Honestly, I don't know why that old hag had to come and ruin everything. I told Julian to tell her it was family only, but he just can't say no to Mommy. That old hag. I am 58 years old. I have built and sold a company worth $38 million. I have served on charity boards, employed hundreds of people, and raised a son who saves lives for a living. I have buried a husband, survived a car accident that nearly killed me, and rebuilt my entire existence from ashes. And to this woman, this 29-year-old influencer who has never worked a real job in her life, I am nothing but that old hag." The tears came before I could stop them. Not the happy tears from moments ago. These were different. These burned. I took a step backward, ready to leave. I would go to my car, cry alone as I had done so many times over the past 3 years, and then come back with a smile on my face, pretending nothing had happened. It was what I always did. Swallow the pain. Keep the peace. Don't make waves. Don't give Julian a reason to choose between his wife and his mother. But then, something happened that changed everything. Julian handed baby Theo to Father Marcus and walked down the aisle toward me. His face was set in an expression I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, standing up to a bully who had pushed a younger kid on the playground. Determined, protective, fierce. He reached me and took my face in both his hands, just the way his father used to do when I was upset about something. The gesture was so familiar, so Theodore, that fresh tears spilled down my cheeks. "Mom," Julian said, his voice low but absolutely steady. I heard every word she said. "Julian, I should go. I don't want to cause problems. It's Theo's special day and—" "No." He cut me off, his hands still cradling my face. "You're not going anywhere. You're going to walk to the front pew, sit down, and watch your grandson be baptized. And then, at the reception, Vivian is going to eat every single word she just said. Do you understand me?" I stared at my son, not comprehending. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I know, Mom. I know everything. About the lies, about the money, about all of it. I've been waiting for the right moment, and she just gave it to me." He wiped my tears with his thumbs, the way I used to wipe his when he was small. "Today, you're going to watch her world fall apart the same way she's tried to make yours fall apart for 3 years. I promise you that." "Julian, I don't understand. What lies? What money?" "Later. Right now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" I nodded, though my mind was spinning. Julian took the gift box from my trembling hands, wrapped his arm around my shoulders, and walked me down the aisle. I was aware of every eye on us, aware of Vivian's shocked expression as she watched her husband escort me to the front pew and sit me down like the honored guest I should always have been. Julian kissed my forehead. "I love you, Mom. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see what was right in front of me." He returned to the altar, took Theo back from Father Marcus, and the ceremony began. But I barely heard a word of it. My mind kept replaying what Vivian had said, what Julian had said, and the look in my son's eyes. A look that told me something significant was about to happen. Vivian kept glancing at me throughout the baptism, her perfect Instagram smile faltering whenever our eyes met. She knew something was wrong. She could feel the shift in the air, the way animals sense an approaching storm, but she had no idea what was coming. Neither did I, really. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt something I had almost forgotten was possible. Hope. The baptism itself was beautiful. Father Marcus spoke about family, about love, about the sacred bonds that tie generations together. He mentioned Theodore, my Theodore, and how fitting it was that this new life carried his name forward. I saw Vivian's jaw tighten at that. She had fought against naming the baby Theodore. She had wanted something more modern, something that didn't connect her son to a man she had never met and a family she clearly resented. But Julian had insisted, and for once he had won. When Father Marcus poured the holy water over little Theo's head, the baby let out a small cry, then settled immediately when Julian whispered something in his ear. I watched my son comfort his son, and I thought about all the nights I had done the same for Julian. All the fevers, the nightmares, the scraped knees and broken hearts. All the moments that build a bond between parent and child that nothing can break. Nothing except the person who comes between them. After the ceremony, everyone gathered in the church hall for photographs. I hung back, not wanting to cause a scene, but Julian came to get me. "Front and center, Mom. You're his grandmother." Vivian's smile was so tight, I thought her face might crack. "Julian, maybe your mother would be more comfortable in the extended family photos. The immediate family shots should really just be us." "My mother is immediate family," Julian said, his voice pleasant but firm. "She's more immediate family than some people here, actually." I caught the flash of anger in Vivian's eyes, quickly concealed. Madison whispered something to her, and Vivian took a deep breath, her mask sliding back into place. "Of course," she said sweetly. "I just meant she might want to rest. She's been standing for a while, and at her age, she built a $47 million company from a sewing machine and a dream, Julian interrupted. I think she can handle standing for a few photos. I watched this exchange with a mixture of pride and unease. This was not my son's usual behavior. Julian had always been a peacemaker, always trying to balance his wife's demands with his duty to me. Something had changed, something fundamental. The photos were taken. I stood beside Julian, holding my grandson for the first time in 47 days, and I felt my heart overflow. Theo was perfect. 10 pounds of pure miracle with Julian's brown eyes and Theodore's chin. He grabbed my finger with his tiny hand and held on, and I had to bite my lip to keep from sobbing. He knows you, Julian said quietly. He knows his grandmother. How could he? Vivian hasn't let me. I stopped myself. This wasn't the time. I know, Mom. I know everything she's done. And today, everyone else is going to know too. The reception was held at Harrington Estate, a beautiful venue I'd actually helped design 15 years ago when the owners wanted to convert their property into an event space. I remembered every fabric choice, every color palette, every carefully considered detail. Walking in now, I felt a strange sense of ownership, even though this was Vivian's party, planned with money I suspected came from Julian's salary, which came from the career I had secretly funded. The irony was not lost on me. Guests mingled, champagne flowed, and Vivian worked the room like the social media professional she was. Perfect smile, perfect dress, perfect mother, holding her perfect baby. No one would have guessed that 20 minutes ago she had called her mother-in-law that old hag in a church. I found a quiet corner and watched. That's what I do, I observe. It's how I built my business, watching what people really wanted, not what they said they wanted. And right now, I was watching my daughter-in-law perform the role of her life. And I was watching my son watching her with an expression I couldn't quite read. Father Marcus found me in my corner. He's known me for 30 years, since before Theodore died, since before Julian was born. He married us in St. Catherine's. He baptized Julian. He spoke at Theodore's funeral and held my hand when I thought I would never stop crying. Eleanor, he said, his voice gentle. How are you holding up? I've been better, Marcus. He nodded, his wise eyes seeing more than I wanted to show. I heard what she said, in the church. I was closer than she realized. My cheeks burned with shame that wasn't mine to carry. I'm sorry you had to hear that. You have nothing to apologize for. You never have. He paused, watching Julian across the room. Your son is a good man, Eleanor. Theodore would be proud. I hope so. I tried my best. You did more than try. You succeeded. Whatever happens today, remember that. You raised him right. I didn't understand what he meant by whatever happens today until much later. But Father Marcus had always had a way of knowing things before they happened. Perhaps it came with the collar. Perhaps it came with age. Either way, his words stayed with me as the afternoon unfolded. Vivian's family was there in force. Her mother, whom she had told Julian was dead, was notably absent, of course. But her sister Madison was there, along with an aunt I had never met, and several cousins who looked at me like I was something unpleasant on the bottom of their shoes. I wondered what Vivian had told them about me, what lies she had spun to make them hate a woman they had never taken the time to know. The first hour passed in a blur of small talk and forced smiles. I made conversation with the people I knew, accepted congratulations on becoming a grandmother, and pretended I didn't notice the way Vivian maneuvered guests away from me whenever possible. And then Julian clinked his champagne glass. The room fell silent. My son stood near the head table, Vivian beside him with Theo in her arms, and he looked out at the gathered crowd with an expression that made my heart stop. I want to thank everyone for being here today, he began, his voice carrying easily across the room. This is a special day for our family, a day of new beginnings, of fresh starts, of truth. I saw Vivian's smile flicker. Truth. An odd word choice for a baptism toast. Before we continue celebrating, Julian said, I need to say something. Something I should have said a long time ago. Vivian leaned toward him, still smiling for the crowd, but I could see tension in every line of her body. Honey, maybe we should do toasts later. No, Vivian. We should do this now. Julian turned to face the guests, but his eyes found mine. Most of you know my mother, Eleanor Castellan. Some of you knew my father, Theodore, before he passed away 26 years ago. What you might not know is the story of how I got here, how I became a doctor, how I built the life I have today. Julian. Vivian's voice was sharp now, the smile gone. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time. He took a breath. When my father died, my mother was 32 years old with a 6-month-old baby and $200 in the bank. She had no degree, no family money, no safety net. What she had was a sewing machine, a talent for design, and a determination to give me every opportunity she never had. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. I had never heard Julian speak about this publicly. Over the next 23 years, my mother built Castellan Interiors from nothing into a company worth $38 million. She worked 18-hour days. She missed sleep, missed meals, missed having any life of her own, all so I could go to good schools, have everything I needed, and eventually attend medical school. Vivian was looking around the room now, calculating, trying to figure out where this was going. What most people don't know, Julian continued, including my wife, is that my mother paid for my entire medical education. She funded my residency. She made the down payment on our apartment. Everything I have, everything I am, started with her sacrifice. The room was utterly silent. I saw confusion on some faces, understanding on others. I'm telling you this, Julian said, because today, in the church where my father's funeral was held, in the sacred space where my son was just baptized, my wife called my mother that old hag and said she had no business being here. Gasps, actual gasps from the crowd. Vivian's face went white. Julian, I was just frustrated. I didn't mean... You meant every word. Julian's voice was calm, but I could hear the steel underneath. You've meant every word for 3 years, Vivian. Every time you found an excuse to keep her from seeing Theo. Every time you forgot to tell her about appointments. Every time you made her feel like an outsider in her own family. This is ridiculous. You're embarrassing me in front of everyone because I made one comment. One comment? Julian laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what we're calling it? One comment? He pulled out his phone, and my heart stopped. Would you like me to read the text messages you sent Madison about my mother? The ones calling her a pathetic old woman who can't let go of her son? The ones planning how to keep her away from holidays? The ones joking about how much longer she'll live? The color drained from Vivian's face completely. Madison was backing toward the door, her eyes wide, and I sat in my corner, tears streaming down my face, finally understanding what my son meant when he said Vivian would eat every word. Finally understanding that this day, this baptism, this celebration of new life, was about to become something else entirely. A reckoning. To understand how I ended up standing in that reception hall, watching my son dismantle his wife's carefully constructed facade, you need to understand where I came from. You need to understand who I was before I became Eleanor Castellan, the woman who built an empire. Before the money, before the success, before any of it. I was born Eleanor Marie Whitfield in a small town in Vermont that most people have never heard of. My father worked at a paper mill until it closed when I was 12. My mother cleaned houses for wealthy families who lived on the other side of town, families whose children went to private schools while I wore hand-me-downs and pretended not to notice the holes in my shoes. We never went hungry, but we never had enough either. That particular kind of poverty, the kind where you're always one emergency away from disaster, shapes you in ways that never fully heal. I met Theodore Castellan when I was 23 years old. He was a young lawyer from a good family, educated at Yale, working at his father's firm in Hartford. I was a seamstress at a bridal shop, the girl who did alterations and dreamed of designing dresses instead of just fixing them. We met when his sister came in for her wedding gown fitting. Theodore was there to pay the bill, and when our eyes met across that shop filled with white tulle and satin, something shifted in the universe. His family did not approve. A Castellan marrying a seamstress from nowhere? His mother made her displeasure known at every opportunity. She called me that girl for the first 2 years of our marriage, never using my name, never acknowledging that I might be worthy of her son. I swallowed it. I smiled. I told myself that love was enough, that Theodore's devotion made up for his mother's cruelty. And Theodore did love me, completely, absolutely, without reservation. He defended me to his family, stood up for me when his mother made cutting remarks, and eventually, when she refused to change, he limited contact with her. He chose me. Every single time, he chose me. We had 5 years together. 5 years of building a life, of planning for the future, of talking about the children we would have and the home we would create. When I got pregnant with Julian, Theodore cried with joy. He painted the nursery himself, a soft yellow color because we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl. He talked to my belly every night, telling our baby about all the adventures they would have together. Julian was 6 months old when Theodore died. It was a rainy night in November. Theodore was driving home from a late meeting, taking the back roads he always took to avoid highway traffic. A drunk driver ran a stop sign doing 60 miles an hour. Theodore's car flipped 3 times before coming to rest in a ditch. The police said he died on impact. They said he didn't suffer. I was in the car with him. I had gone to meet him for dinner, a rare date night while my mother watched the baby. I was in the passenger seat when that truck came out of nowhere. I remember the headlights, the screech of tires, the world spinning. I remember Theodore's hand reaching for mine in that last second. And then I remember waking up in a hospital 3 days later with a fractured skull, a broken collarbone, and a scar on my eyebrow that I would carry for the rest of my life. They told me Theodore was gone. They told me while I was still connected to machines, still foggy from painkillers, still trying to remember my own name. A nurse held my hand while a doctor spoke words that didn't make sense. Your husband didn't survive. We're so sorry. I wanted to die. I'm not proud of that, but it's the truth. In those first weeks, the only thing that kept me breathing was Julian. My baby boy who would never know his father. My son who now depended entirely on me. A 27-year-old widow with no education, no career, no idea how to survive. Theodore's mother came to the funeral. She stood at the graveside in her black Chanel suit and looked at me with something that might have been satisfaction. Her son was dead, but at least he wouldn't be married to that girl anymore. She offered no condolences. She did not acknowledge Julian, her only grandchild. She simply turned and walked away, and I never saw her again. I learned later that she had tried to contest Theodore's will, tried to claim that I had somehow manipulated him, that his modest life insurance and small savings should go to the family rather than to me. She failed because Theodore had been meticulous about his paperwork, had specifically stated that everything should go to his wife and child. But she tried. Even in the depths of my grief, she tried to take what little I had left. The life insurance was enough to pay off our small apartment and keep us fed for about 2 years. Theodore's savings added another few months to that timeline. I knew, even through the fog of grief, that I needed a plan. I needed a way to support myself and my son. I started sewing again. It was the only skill I had, the only thing I knew how to do well. I took in alterations from a local dry cleaner, made curtains for neighbors, repaired clothes for anyone who would pay. The money was barely enough, but it was something. And slowly, as Julian grew from an infant into a toddler, I began to dream again. I noticed that wealthy women would pay significant amounts for custom window treatments. Beautiful fabrics, elegant designs, things that made their homes look like magazine photographs. I started experimenting, creating samples from remnant fabrics I bought for pennies at estate sales. I knocked on doors in the wealthy neighborhoods, showing my work to anyone who would look. Most turned me away, but some didn't. One commission became 2, 2 became 10, 10 became 100. By the time Julian was 5, I had a small workshop in my apartment and 3 women working for me part-time. By the time he was 10, I had a proper studio and a waiting list of clients. By the time he started high school, Castellan Interiors was dressing windows in mansions across New England, and I was being featured in design magazines I used to flip through while dreaming impossible dreams. I never remarried. People asked me about it, set me up on dates, told me that Julian needed a father figure. But Theodore was my one great love. Some people get many loves in a lifetime. I got one, and it was enough. More than enough. The memory of those 5 years sustained me through the hardest decades of my life. What I didn't tell Julian, what I never told anyone, was how I managed to pay for his education. When he was accepted to Johns Hopkins for medical school, he believed he had received a full scholarship. He believed that his academic excellence had earned him a free ride. In reality, I had created a fake scholarship fund, funneled my own money through a lawyer's trust account, and paid every single tuition bill myself. I did the same for his residency, his board exam fees, his first apartment near the hospital. I did it because I remembered what it felt like to struggle, to worry about money, to lie awake at night doing math that never added up. I wanted Julian to focus on becoming the best doctor he could be, not stressed about student loans and debt. It was, perhaps, the wrong thing to do. Maybe I should have been honest. Maybe I should have let him experience some financial struggle, taught him the value of money the hard way. But when you grow up poor, when you know what it feels like to have nothing, you will do almost anything to spare your children that same pain. I sold Castellan Interiors when I was 55 years old. $38 million after taxes and fees went into my accounts. I could have retired then, could have traveled the world, could have lived a life of pure leisure. Instead, I set aside funds for Julian's future, for my future grandchildren's education, for charitable causes Theodore would have supported. I kept enough to live comfortably, to maintain my home in Greenwich, to help my family when needed. When Julian brought Vivian home for the first time, I wanted to like her. I tried to like her. She was beautiful, polished, well-spoken. She told us she was studying art history, that she came from a good family in Boston, that she was working part-time as a brand consultant while finishing her degree. Something felt off from the beginning, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Her stories didn't quite add up. The details changed subtly each time she told them. Her family was from Boston, then Connecticut, then the Northeast. She graduated from Columbia, or was it NYU? She had an internship at a gallery, or was it a museum? These inconsistencies nagged at me, but Julian was so happy, so clearly in love, that I kept my concerns to myself. They got engaged after 18 months of dating. The wedding was beautiful and expensive, paid for entirely by Julian, which meant paid for entirely by the money I had given him over the years. Vivian's family did not contribute a cent. Her father was traveling for business and couldn't attend. Her mother was unwell and sent her regrets. Only her sister Madison came, and she spent the entire reception glued to her phone. After the wedding, Vivian's attitude toward me changed, or perhaps it didn't change so much as reveal itself. The mask slipped, little by little, showing the contempt underneath. Invitations to dinner became less frequent. Holidays became complicated negotiations. My calls went to voicemail more often than not. When Vivian got pregnant, I thought things might improve. A grandchild, I hoped, might bring us together. Instead, it drove us further apart. She didn't want me at doctor's appointments. She didn't want my advice, my help, my presence. When she went into labor, Julian called me from the hospital, but by the time I arrived, she had instructed the nurses to keep me out of the room. I met my grandson when he was 6 hours old, and Vivian looked at me the entire time like I was intruding on something that didn't belong to me. 47 days before the baptism, Vivian told Julian that she needed space from his mother. She said I was overbearing and controlling. She said I made her feel judged. Julian, trying to keep peace in his marriage, asked me to give them some time. I agreed, because what else could I do? For 47 days, I saw my grandson only through Instagram photos. For 47 days, I waited by the phone for calls that never came. For 47 days, I swallowed my hurt and told myself that this was just a phase, that Vivian would come around, that eventually things would get better. And then came the baptism. And then came those words in the church. And then came Julian's hand on my face, his voice telling me to trust him. I had no idea, sitting in that reception hall, watching my son prepare to expose his wife, how long he had known the truth. I had no idea what he had discovered, or how deep Vivian's deceptions really went. All I knew was that my boy, my Julian, had finally seen what I had been too afraid to show him, and nothing would ever be the same again. The silence in that reception hall was absolute. 120 guests stood frozen, champagne glasses suspended mid-air, conversations abandoned mid-sentence. Every eye was fixed on Julian and Vivienne, on the phone in my son's hand, on the marriage unraveling in real time before witnesses who had come expecting cake and celebration. Vivian recovered first. She always was quick on her feet, I'll give her that. She shifted Theo to her other hip and laughed, a bright, artificial sound that fooled no one. Julian, honey, I think you've had too much champagne. You're embarrassing yourself. She turned to the crowd with a conspiratorial smile. New father exhaustion. You all understand. I haven't had a single drink today, Julian said calmly, and I'm not the one who should be embarrassed. This is ridiculous. Whatever you think you found on my phone, I didn't find anything on your phone, Vivian. You're too careful for that. You delete everything. Julian's voice was steady, almost gentle. But you're not as careful with your sister's phone, or with the private investigator I hired 3 months ago. The color drained from Madison's face. She took a step backward, bumping into a waiter carrying a tray of appetizers. The tray crashed to the floor, but no one even looked. Everyone was watching the main event. You hired a private investigator? Vivian's voice cracked for the first time. To spy on me? Your own wife? To find the truth, something you seem incapable of telling. I watched this exchange from my corner, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Part of me wanted to stop this, to protect my son from the pain of what was coming. But a larger part of me, the part that had been humiliated and dismissed and called that old hag in a church, needed to see this through. Julian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folder. A simple manila folder, the kind you can buy at any office supply store. But the contents of that folder, I would learn, had the power to destroy everything Vivian had built. Let's start with the basics, Julian said, opening the folder. Your name is not Vivian Ashford. It's Tammy Lynn Greer. You were born in Youngstown, Ohio, not Boston. Your father didn't travel for business. He's been in state prison for the past 12 years for armed robbery. And your mother isn't dead, Vivian. She's very much alive. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I felt my own breath catch in my throat. I had suspected Vivian was hiding something, but this was beyond anything I had imagined. That's a lie, Vivian said, but her voice had lost its confidence. You're making this up to hurt me. Am I? Julian turned toward the entrance of the reception hall. Mrs. Greer, would you come in, please? The doors opened, and a woman walked in. She was thin, worn, probably in her early 60s, but looking much older. Her clothes were clean, but clearly inexpensive, her gray hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked around the elegant venue with wide, uncertain eyes, clearly out of her element. But when her gaze found Vivienne, Her face crumpled with an emotion I recognized immediately. The desperate love of a mother for a child who has rejected her. "Tammy," the woman whispered. "Oh, Tammy, baby." Vivian's mask shattered completely. For one moment, just one, I saw the scared little girl underneath the perfect facade. Then the walls went back up, harder than before. "I don't know this woman," Vivian announced to the crowd. "She's obviously some actress Julian hired to—" "I changed your diapers, Tammy Lynn." Mrs. Greer's voice was quiet but clear. "I walked the floor with you when you had colic. I worked double shifts at the diner so you could have new shoes for school. You think I don't know my own daughter? You are not my mother. My mother is dead. I'm standing right here, baby. I've been standing right here for 4 years, waiting for you to come home, waiting for you to stop being ashamed of where you came from." The crowd was murmuring now, people whispering to each other, phones appearing as guests recorded what was happening. Vivienne saw the phones, and something shifted in her expression. Fear, real, genuine fear of exposure. "Julian, stop this." Her voice dropped to an urgent whisper, though in the silent room everyone could hear. "Whatever you want, whatever you're trying to prove, we can discuss it privately. Please, think about Theo. Think about our son." "I am thinking about Theo," Julian said. "I'm thinking about what kind of mother lies about everything, who she is, where she came from, even whether her own mother is alive. I'm thinking about whether I want my son raised by someone who treats his grandmother like garbage while pretending to be something she's not." I watched Vivian's mind racing, calculating, trying to find an angle. She was cornered, and cornered animals are dangerous. I knew that. I had dealt with enough difficult people in business to recognize the moment when someone shifts from defense to attack. "Fine," Vivian said, her voice suddenly cold. "You want to air our dirty laundry in public? Let's talk about your mother, Julian. Let's talk about how she's been manipulating you your entire life." My stomach dropped. Here it came. "Your precious mother didn't pay for your education out of love. She did it to control you, to make sure you'd never be free of her, never be able to choose your own life, never be able to put your wife first. She kept it secret because she knew if you found out, you'd see her for what she really is. A controlling, manipulative woman who can't let go of her son." Julian's expression didn't change. "Is that what you tell yourself?" "It's the truth. She's been threatened by me since the day we met. She's jealous that you love me, that you chose me, that I gave you a son. Everything she's done, all her so-called generosity, it's just a way to keep you dependent on her, to make you feel guilty, to make sure I never fully have you." I should have spoken up. I should have defended myself. But the words wouldn't come. Vivian's accusations, as twisted as they were, hit something deep inside me. The secret I had kept for so long, the money I had given without telling Julian, suddenly looked different through her lens. Had I been controlling? Had I been manipulative? Had my love for my son crossed a line somewhere? Julian walked toward me. He knelt down beside my chair and took my hands in his. "Mom," he said gently, "I know you paid for everything. I've known for almost a year." The world tilted. "What? How?" "I found the trust documents when I was looking for our marriage certificate. Vivian wanted it for some paperwork, and I went through Dad's old files. I found everything. The scholarship that came from your account. The down payment that traced back to you. All of it." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "Julian, I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I just didn't want you to feel burdened or obligated or—" "Mom." He squeezed my hands. "You worked yourself to exhaustion for 23 years so I could have opportunities you never had. You sacrificed your entire life for me. And you did it quietly, without asking for recognition, without making me feel like I owed you anything. That's not manipulation. That's love. Real love. The kind Vivian has never understood because she's never experienced it. He stood and turned back to his wife. You want to know the difference between my mother and you, Vivienne? My mother gave everything she had without expecting anything in return. You've taken everything you could get while giving nothing but lies. Vivienne's eyes darted around the room, looking for allies, finding none. Even Madison had moved away from her, putting physical distance between herself and her sister. This is insane, Vivienne said. You're having some kind of breakdown. I'm taking Theo and leaving. She moved toward the door, but Julian's voice stopped her cold. I wouldn't do that. Not unless you want to explain to a judge why you've been siphoning money from our joint account into a secret account for the past 18 months. Vivienne froze. $43,000, Julian continued. That's how much you've transferred into an account under your real name, Tammy Greer, an account that also shows regular deposits from someone named Derek Holloway. He paused. Your ex-boyfriend. The one you told me you hadn't spoken to in years. I watched Vivienne's face cycle through emotions. Shock, fear, rage, and finally something that looked almost like relief. The relief of someone who is tired of carrying the weight of so many lies. Derek is just a friend, she said weakly. A friend you've been meeting at hotels in the city? A friend whose Venmo shows payments to you labeled "for us"? A friend whose apartment you visited 11 times in the past 3 months while you were telling me you were at yoga class? The crowd had gone from shocked to riveted. This was better than any reality television, more dramatic than any soap opera. Real life, real pain, real betrayal playing out before their eyes. I should have felt vindicated. This woman who had tormented me for 3 years was being exposed for what she truly was. But watching her crumble, watching the last shreds of her dignity stripped away in public, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Because I recognized something in Vivienne's eyes. The desperate determination of someone who grew up with nothing, who clawed their way out of poverty, who would do anything to never go back. I had been that person once. I had felt that hunger, that fear, that willingness to sacrifice everything for security. The difference was that I had built my escape honestly. Vivienne had built hers on lies. Mrs. Greer approached her daughter slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. Tammy, honey, it doesn't have to be like this. We can work through this together. You can come home. Home? Vivienne laughed bitterly. To that trailer? To that dead-end town where everyone knows everyone's business? Where I'd spend the rest of my life hearing about how Tammy Greer's husband was a thief and her daughter wasn't any better? I never cared what people said. I only cared about you. Well, I cared. I cared about every whisper, every look, every time someone called me the Greer girl like it was a disease. I got out, Mom. I made something of myself. I became someone. You became a lie, Julian said quietly. You became a person who doesn't exist. And the worst part is, you didn't have to. I would have loved you anyway, Vivienne. If you had told me the truth from the beginning, I would have loved you anyway. For a moment, I saw something crack in Vivienne's facade. A flash of genuine emotion, of regret, of understanding of what she had thrown away. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the hardness that had become her armor. You would have loved me? She laughed again, harsh and hollow. You would have brought Tammy Greer from the trailer park home to meet Eleanor Castellan? You would have told your country club friends that your wife's father was in prison? Please, you wanted the fantasy as much as I did. I wanted a partner. I wanted someone to build a life with. I wanted the mother of my children to be someone I could trust. Julian shook his head. I never wanted a fantasy. I wanted you. But you never let me see who you really are. The reception hall had become a courtroom, a therapy session, a confessional all at once. Guests stood in small clusters, some openly crying, others recording everything on their phones. I saw Father Marcus near the door, his face grave, his hands clasped in front of him. I saw Vivienne's aunt looking horrified, her cousins edging toward the exit. And I saw my son, standing tall in the middle of the wreckage of his marriage, holding the truth like a weapon he never wanted to use. What happens now? Vivian's voice was small, defeated. You've humiliated me in front of everyone I know. You've brought my mother here to remind me of everything I ran away from. What else do you want? I want a divorce, Julian said simply. I want shared custody of Theo. I want you to have a relationship with our son, because despite everything, you're still his mother. But I want out of this marriage. I can't be married to someone I don't know. And the money? The account? Keep it. I don't care about the money. I never did. Vivian stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something I didn't expect. She walked over to me. I tensed, preparing for another attack, another round of accusations. But instead, she just stood there, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. You know the funny thing? She said quietly, so only I could hear. I actually admire you. You built everything from nothing, just like I tried to do. The difference is, you did it honestly. I convinced myself that the lying was necessary, that no one would give me a chance if they knew the truth about where I came from. But you proved that wasn't true. You came from nothing and became everything without lying about who you were. It's not too late, I heard myself say. You could start over, tell the truth, be who you really are. Who I really am is Tammy Greer from a trailer park in Ohio, with a father in prison and a mother who works at a diner. Nobody wants to be that person, Mrs. Castellan. Nobody. Your son doesn't care where you came from. He just needs his mother to love him honestly. Vivian's eyes glistened. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the person she might have been if fear hadn't twisted her into something unrecognizable. I do love him, she whispered. Theo is the only real thing in my life, the only thing I didn't fake. Then be real for him. If nothing else, be real for him. She stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked toward her mother. Mrs. Greer opened her arms, and Vivian hesitated before stepping into them. It wasn't a full reconciliation. It wasn't forgiveness or healing or any of those neat endings that happen in movies. But it was something. A crack in the wall. A first step. Julian came to stand beside me. Are you okay, Mom? I looked up at my son, this man I had raised alone, this good and decent person who had just destroyed his marriage to defend my honor. My heart was full and broken at the same time. I should be asking you that. I've known for months what I was going to do. I've had time to prepare. He sat down next to me. You got blindsided today. First by what she said in the church, then by all of this. Julian, I'm sorry I kept the money secret. I'm sorry I didn't trust you with the truth. Mom, stop. You gave me everything. You gave me my entire future. The only thing I'm sorry about is that you felt you had to hide it. He took my hand. I found out about the trust fund the same week I found out Vivian was lying about everything. I had two choices. Feel betrayed by both of you, or understand the difference between your secret and hers. You kept yours to protect me. She kept hers to use me. That's not the same thing. I squeezed his hand, unable to speak through the tears. You know what I realized? Julian continued. When I found out what you did, my first thought wasn't anger. It was pride. Pride that I came from you, that everything I've accomplished started with your sacrifice. Vivian's lies made me feel stupid, used, like I didn't know anything. Your secret made me feel loved. Across the room, Vivian was talking quietly with her mother and Father Marcus. The other guests had begun to disperse, some leaving quickly, others lingering in small groups dissecting what they had witnessed. The beautiful baptism reception had become something else entirely, a reckoning, a revelation, a painful but necessary uncovering of truth. What happens now? I asked Julian. Now we figure out custody. Now we tell our lawyers to be civil because we have a child together. Now I focus on being the best father I can be to Theo. He paused. And now you come to Sunday dinner every week without excuses or cancellations or anyone making you feel unwelcome. I smiled through my tears. I'd like that. Theo needs his grandmother, his real grandmother, the one who built an empire to give her son a future, the one who loved so hard she didn't know how to stop. He needs to know where he comes from, the real story, not some made-up fantasy about perfect people who never struggled. Baby Theo, who had somehow slept through most of the drama, chose that moment to wake up and cry. Vivian looked around, uncertain, and Julian stood. "May I?" he asked his wife. She nodded, handing over the baby. Julian brought him to me. "Here, Mom, hold your grandson." I took Theo in my arms. This perfect small person who carried his grandfather's name and his father's eyes. He stopped crying almost immediately, looking up at me with that serious infant expression that always seems to see right through to your soul. "Hello, little one," I whispered. "I'm your grandmother. And I'm going to tell you so many stories about who you are and where you come from. The real stories, the true ones." Theo grabbed my finger and held on tight. And in that moment, despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and the revelations and the marriage falling apart around us, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope for the future. Real, genuine hope. The reception hall had emptied considerably by the time Father Marcus approached us. Most guests had left, some with hurried goodbyes, others slipping out without a word, eager to escape the discomfort of witnessing a family implode. The catering staff moved quietly through the space, clearing plates and glasses, pretending not to listen to the quiet conversations still happening in corners. Vivian sat at a table near the window with her mother and Madison. Their voices were too low to hear, but I could see the tension in their body language. Mrs. Greer kept reaching for her daughter's hand. Vivian kept pulling away. Some walls take more than one day to break down. Father Marcus pulled a chair close to where Julian and I sat with Theo sleeping in my arms. "Julian," he said gently, "I need to tell you something. I should have told you months ago, but I wasn't certain it was my place." Julian looked up, exhausted but alert. "What is it, Father?" 3 months ago, your wife came to see me. She asked to make a confession." I felt Julian tense beside me. The Catholic seal of confession is sacred and unbreakable. Whatever Vivian had told Father Marcus in that confessional, he could never reveal. "I can't tell you what she said," Father Marcus continued, confirming my thoughts, "but I can tell you what I observed outside of confession. She was frightened, Julian. Genuinely frightened. Not of you, not of your mother, of herself." "What do you mean?" Father Marcus glanced toward Vivian, then back at us. "I've been a priest for 42 years. I've heard thousands of confessions, counseled hundreds of troubled souls. I've learned to recognize the difference between people who do wrong because they're selfish and people who do wrong because they're broken. Are you asking me to forgive her? I'm asking you to understand that the woman you married is not evil. She's wounded, deeply, profoundly wounded, in ways that made her believe lying was the only path to safety." He paused. "That doesn't excuse what she's done. It doesn't mean you should stay married to her. But as you move forward, as you raise your son together, it might help to know that she didn't set out to hurt you. She set out to survive. She just chose the wrong way to do it." Julian was quiet for a long moment. I watched his face, saw the war between anger and compassion playing out behind his eyes. My son had always been tender-hearted, always quick to see the good in people. It was one of his greatest strengths and his greatest vulnerabilities. "She called my mother a hag," he finally said, "in a church on our son's baptism day. Yes, and that was cruel and inexcusable. But cruelty often comes from pain, Julian. People who are secure in themselves don't need to tear others down." I thought about what Vivian had whispered to me earlier, about admiring me, about wishing she could have built her escape honestly, about Theo being the only real thing in her life. Maybe Father Marcus was right. Maybe there was more to this woman than the villain I had made her in my mind. "Father," I said, speaking for the first time, "what would you have us do?" He smiled at me, that gentle smile I remembered from Theodore's funeral, from Julian's baptism, from all the moments of my life when I had needed spiritual guidance. "I would have you do what you've always done, Eleanor. Love fiercely. Forgive when you can. Protect what matters." He looked at Theo sleeping in my arms. "This child is what matters now. His well-being, his future, his relationship with both his parents and both his grandmothers. Everything else is secondary." Both his grandmothers. I looked over at Mrs. Greer, this woman I had never met before today, this woman whose daughter had tormented me for 3 years. She looked broken, overwhelmed, completely out of place in this elegant venue. But she also looked hopeful that she might finally get her daughter back. "Julian," I said quietly, "maybe you should talk to her. Not to Vivian, to her mother." He looked at me with surprise. "Why?" "Because she's Theo's grandmother too. And because she might help you understand things about Vivian that Vivian herself can't explain." Julian studied my face, perhaps looking for the catch, the hidden agenda. But there was none. In watching Vivian crumble today, I had realized something important. My enemy was not this damaged young woman who had lied her way into my family. My enemy was the fear and shame that had driven her to it. And the best way to fight that enemy was not with more anger, but with understanding. Julian kissed my forehead, then walked across the room to where Mrs. Greer sat. I watched him introduce himself, watched her face light up with surprise and tentative hope. They began to talk, quietly, and I saw Vivian watching them with an expression I couldn't quite read. Father Marcus and I sat in comfortable silence, Theo still sleeping peacefully against my chest. The afternoon light through the windows had turned golden, casting long shadows across the empty reception hall. "You've raised a remarkable son," Father Marcus said. "I had a remarkable husband, for the short time I had him. Theodore's influence shaped Julian as much as mine. Theodore would be proud of both of you today." I felt the familiar ache that came whenever someone mentioned my husband. 26 years, and it never fully went away. I didn't want it to. That ache was proof that our love had been real. "Father, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think I was wrong, keeping the money secret from Julian all those years?" Father Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think you did what you believed was best for your son. Your intentions were pure. Whether it was the right choice?" He shrugged. "Who can say? We make decisions with the information we have at the time. We love imperfectly because we are imperfect beings. The important thing is that your love was genuine. Julian knows that now." Across the room, Julian and Mrs. Greer were still talking. I saw her wipe tears from her eyes, saw Julian put a comforting hand on her shoulder. Whatever they were discussing, it seemed to be bringing some measure of healing. Vivian stood suddenly and walked toward them. I tensed, expecting confrontation. But instead, she simply stood beside her mother, not touching her, but present, acknowledging her. It was a small gesture, but I understood its significance. After years of pretending her mother was dead, Vivian was choosing to let her exist again. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was a beginning. Theo stirred in my arms, his small face scrunching up before relaxing back into sleep. I held him a little tighter, thinking about all the beginnings ahead of him. His first steps, his first words, his first day of school. All the moments I had almost missed because of Vivian's cruelty. All the moments I would now be present for. Whatever happened next, whatever form Julian and Vivian's divorce took, whatever custody arrangement they worked out, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would be part of my grandson's life. Not as an intruder, not as that old woman, but as his grandmother, his real grandmother, the one who would teach him where he came from and who he could become. And that was worth every moment of pain that had led to this day. The weeks following Theo's baptism were unlike anything I had experienced before. The carefully constructed walls between Julian's family and me had crumbled, but what rose from the rubble was still uncertain, still fragile. Divorce proceedings began almost immediately, and with them came the complicated negotiations of two lives being untangled. Julian moved back into his childhood bedroom in my Greenwich home while the lawyers sorted out the apartment situation. It was strange having him there again, this grown man walking the same hallways he had run through as a child. I would catch myself listening for his footsteps at night, the way I had when he was small and prone to nightmares. Some habits never die, no matter how many decades pass. Vivian remained in their Manhattan apartment with Theo. Despite everything, Julian insisted on being fair. He didn't want to uproot his son from the only home he had known, didn't want to use the baby as a weapon the way so many divorcing couples do. It was one of the things that made me proudest of him, that even in his anger and betrayal, he thought first of his child. The custody arrangement was still being worked out, but Julian saw Theo 3 times a week, and I was there for every visit. Vivian never apologized for what she had said in the church. I didn't expect her to. But she no longer blocked my access to my grandson, no longer invented excuses for why I couldn't hold him or feed him or rock him to sleep. The Cold War between us had ended, replaced by something more like a wary ceasefire. It was during one of these visits, about 6 weeks after the baptism, that everything changed again. Julian and I had come to the apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. Vivian let us in without her usual stiff formality, and I noticed immediately that something was different. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands trembling slightly as she handed Theo to Julian. "I need to talk to both of you," she said. "Can you sit down?" Julian and I exchanged glances. We settled on the living room sofa, Theo gurgling happily in his father's arms, oblivious to the tension in the room. Vivian sat across from us, perched on the edge of an armchair like she might flee at any moment. She took a deep breath, then another. Whatever she was about to say, it was costing her something. "I went to the doctor last week," she began. "Not my regular doctor, a specialist." My heart clenched. Despite everything, I didn't wish illness on this woman. She was my grandson's mother. Her suffering would be his suffering too. "What kind of specialist?" Julian asked, his voice carefully neutral. "An oncologist." The word hung in the air. Julian's arms tightened around Theo. "I found a lump," Vivian continued, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 weeks ago, in my breast. I didn't tell anyone because I thought it was nothing. I thought I was being paranoid." She laughed bitterly. For once in my life, I wasn't lying. I genuinely believed it was nothing. "And?" Julian prompted. "It's stage 2 breast cancer. They caught it relatively early, which is good, but I need surgery, chemotherapy, possibly radiation. The treatment plan will take at least 6 months, maybe longer." I watched emotions play across my son's face, shock, fear, and despite everything, genuine concern for the woman who had betrayed him so thoroughly. "What's the prognosis?" I heard myself ask. Vivian looked at me, surprised that I was the one asking. "Good, actually. My doctor says the survival rate for this type and stage is over 90%. But the treatment will be brutal. I'll be sick, exhausted, unable to care for Theo the way he needs." She broke down then, the careful composure shattering into raw sobs. This was not the polished, manipulative Vivian I had come to know. This was a terrified young woman facing her own mortality, facing the possibility that her son might grow up without a mother. "I don't know what to do," she gasped between sobs. "I don't have anyone. My mother is in Ohio. She can barely take care of herself. Madison has her own life. She can't drop everything to help me. And I've burned every bridge, every friendship, every relationship that might have supported me through something like this." She looked at Julian with desperate eyes. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I lied to you, cheated you, treated your mother terribly. But I don't know where else to turn. I'm so scared, Julian. I'm so scared I'm going to die, and Theo won't even remember me." Julian was quiet for a long moment. I could see him processing, weighing his anger against his compassion, his sense of justice against his sense of mercy. This was the test of who he really was, the measure of the man I had raised. Finally, he spoke. "You're not going to die, Vivienne. You heard the doctor. 90% survival rate. You're going to fight this, and you're going to beat it. But the treatment? We'll figure it out." He looked at me, a question in his eyes. I nodded, understanding what he was asking without him having to say it. "Vivienne," I said, and she turned to me with something like fear in her expression. "I know we've had our differences. I know you've said things about me that were hurtful, done things that were wrong, but right now, none of that matters. What matters is that you get healthy for your son." "I don't understand," she whispered. "I'm offering to help. Not for you, for Theo. He needs his mother, and his mother needs support to get through this treatment. So I'm offering to help." She stared at me like I had sprouted a second head. "After everything I've done? You would help me? I told you at the reception that it wasn't too late to start over. I meant it. This isn't how I imagined it happening, but maybe this is the fresh start you need. Not just with your health, but with everything." Vivienne broke down again, but this time her tears were different. There was something like hope mixed in with the fear, something like gratitude struggling to emerge from beneath years of defensiveness. Julian handed Theo to me and went to sit beside his soon-to-be ex-wife. He didn't hold her or comfort her the way a husband would, but he put his hand on her shoulder, a gesture of human compassion that transcended their broken marriage. "Here's what we're going to do," he said. "First, we're going to put the divorce on hold, not because I'm changing my mind about ending the marriage, but because you don't need that stress right now. Second, you're going to move into the guest house at my mother's property." I nodded, having anticipated this. The guest house had been empty for years, used only occasionally for visiting friends. It was fully furnished, private, but close enough that help would always be available. "Third," Julian continued, "we're going to bring your mother here from Ohio. She can stay in the main house with Mom. You need family right now, and like it or not, she's family." "Julian, I can't." "You can. You're the mother of my son. Whatever happened between us, that bond exists, and I'm not going to let you face cancer alone because we're getting divorced." He paused. "And maybe while you're recovering, you can work on becoming the person you always pretended to be, the person you might have been if you hadn't been so afraid." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Vivienne moved into my guest house, a process that felt surreal on every level. The woman who had called me a hag was now living on my property, dependent on my hospitality. But watching her face when she saw the comfortable space I had prepared, the flowers I had placed on the nightstand, the soft blankets I had folded on the bed, something shifted between us. "Why are you doing this?" she asked me that first night. "Really?" "Because I know what it's like to face the worst moment of your life alone," I told her. "When Theodore died, I had no one. No family, no support, just a baby and a mountain of grief. I survived, but I wouldn't wish that isolation on anyone, not even someone who hurt me." "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time, I believed her. For what I said in the church. For everything. "I know. Do you forgive me?" I considered the question honestly. "I'm working on it. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a process. But I'm trying, Vivienne. That's all I can promise." Mrs. Greer arrived from Ohio 3 days later. Her reunion with her daughter was tearful and complicated, years of estrangement colliding with the urgency of illness. But they were trying, too, both of them, to rebuild something from the wreckage. I found myself in the strange position of hosting my daughter-in-law's mother. This woman from a completely different world who had never eaten a meal that cost more than $15, who had never stayed in a house with more than 3 rooms. We had nothing in common except our love for our children and our grandchild. And yet, somehow, we became friends. Dorothy Greer, as I learned her name was, had a quiet wisdom that came from a hard life lived with integrity. She told me about raising Vivian alone after her husband went to prison, about working double shifts to keep food on the table, about watching her brilliant daughter burn with shame at their poverty. I knew she was lying to that young man, Dorothy confessed one evening as we sat on my porch watching the sunset. When she brought him home that first time, I could see she'd told him stories that weren't true. I should have said something. I should have made her tell the truth. Why didn't you? Because she was happy. For the first time since she was a little girl, my Tammy was happy. And I thought maybe if she could just keep the lie going long enough, it would become true. She'd become the person she was pretending to be. Dorothy shook her head. That's not how lies work, though. They just get bigger until they swallow you whole. She's trying now, I said. That counts for something. Does it? Can someone really change who they are? I thought about that question for a long time. I think people can change what they do. Who they are at the core. Maybe that stays the same. But Vivian isn't bad at her core, Dorothy. She's scared. She's been scared her whole life. Maybe now that she's facing something truly terrifying, the smaller fears won't have so much power over her anymore. Vivian's surgery was scheduled for a Thursday morning in early December. Julian took the day off work to be there, and I stayed home with Theo and Dorothy. We spent the hours of the operation together, the 3 of us, this unlikely family bound together by circumstance and crisis. When Julian called to say the surgery had gone well, that they had gotten clean margins, that the prognosis was excellent, Dorothy wept with relief. I held Theo up to the phone so his father could hear his babbling, a reminder of why all of this mattered. The chemotherapy began 2 weeks later. Vivian lost her beautiful blonde hair, lost weight, lost the ability to pretend that everything was fine. But in losing those things, she seemed to find something else. Honesty, perhaps. Or maybe just the exhaustion that comes when you no longer have energy to maintain a facade. I visited her in the guest house every day, bringing meals, sitting with her while she was too tired to do anything but sleep. We didn't always talk. Sometimes I just read in the chair by her bed while she drifted in and out of consciousness. But I was there, present, available. One afternoon, about halfway through her treatment, Vivian said something that stopped me cold. You know what I realized? You're the first person who ever showed up for me without wanting something in return. I looked up from my book. What do you mean? Everyone in my life, everyone before Julian, they always wanted something. Men wanted my body. Friends wanted my connections. Even my father, before he went away, he only paid attention to me when I could do something for him. She paused, her voice weak but clear. You don't want anything from me. You're just here. I want you to get healthy. I want you to be a good mother to Theo. That's not for you, though. That's for him. For Julian. She shook her head weakly. No one has ever just wanted me to be okay for my own sake. Your mother does. My mother wants me to be okay so she won't lose me. That's different. I set my book aside and moved to sit on the edge of her bed. This woman, this complicated, damaged, infuriating woman, was seeing clearly for perhaps the first time in her life. The illness had stripped away everything false, leaving only the raw truth underneath. Vivian, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone except Julian. When Theodore died, I wanted to die too. I looked at my baby, my 6-month-old son, and I felt nothing but obligation. Not love, not joy, just the weight of responsibility I didn't think I could carry. She stared at me, surprised by this confession. It took months before I felt genuine love for Julian again. Months of going through the motions, of pretending to be a mother when I felt like a shell. But I kept going. I kept showing up, and eventually the feelings came back. The love came back. I took her hand. "You're going to survive this, Vivian. And when you come out on the other side, you're going to have a chance to build something real. Not the fantasy you created, but a real life with real relationships." What if I don't know how? None of us know how. We just keep showing up until we figure it out. She squeezed my hand weakly, tears sliding down her pale cheeks. And in that moment, in that small guest house on my property, something shifted between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. The recognition that we were both just damaged people doing our best to love and be loved. It was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings are enough. 1 year later, I stood in my garden watching Theo take his first steps. He was 14 months old, sturdy and determined, his little legs wobbling as he lurched from Julian's outstretched arms toward mine. 3 steps, 4, 5, and then he tumbled into my embrace, giggling with delight at his own accomplishment. "Did you see that?" Julian shouted, his face bright with pride. "Did you see him?" "I saw," I laughed, kissing Theo's chubby cheek. "I saw everything." From the patio, Vivian watched with a smile that reached her eyes. Her hair had grown back, different now, darker and curlier than before. She said the chemo had changed it, and she had decided to keep her natural color instead of going back to blonde. It suited her, I thought, made her look more real. Dorothy sat beside her daughter, snapping photos on the phone Julian had bought her, learning to use technology at 63 because she wanted to send pictures to her friends back in Ohio. She had gone home briefly after Vivian's treatment ended, but she came back within a month. There was nothing for her there anymore, she said. Her family was here now. The divorce had been finalized in the spring, quiet and uncontested. Julian and Vivian shared custody of Theo, a week with each parent, trading off on Sundays. It wasn't a conventional arrangement, but it worked. Theo had 2 homes, 2 bedrooms, and more love than most children could dream of. Vivian had moved out of my guest house 6 months ago into a small apartment in town. She was working now, a real job at a local interior design firm. When the owner learned she was connected to me, she had called to ask if I objected to the hire. I told her that Vivian deserved a chance to build something honest, and that I would consider it a personal favor if she gave her that opportunity. It wasn't charity exactly. It was investment. Investment in my grandson's mother, in the woman she was becoming, in the family we were all still learning to be. "Grandma," Vivian called from the patio, "do you want iced tea?" The word still surprised me every time she used it. Grandma. Not Mrs. Castellan, not Eleanor, not the pointed silence she used to employ. She had started calling me Grandma about 4 months into her treatment, when the boundaries between us had become too blurred to maintain formality. I hadn't asked her to. She just started doing it, and I let her. "Yes, please," I called back, settling Theo on my hip. Julian came to stand beside me, watching Vivian pour tea with her mother, the 2 of them chatting easily in a way that would have been unimaginable a year ago. "You know what she told me last week?" he said quietly. "What?" "She said the cancer was the best thing that ever happened to her, because it made her stop running long enough to figure out who she actually was." I considered this. It was a strange thing to say, that a life-threatening illness could be a gift. But I understood what she meant. Sometimes we need to lose everything before we can see what matters. "Are you happy?" I asked my son. He thought about it, really thought, the way he always did when I asked him serious questions. "I'm not unhappy. The divorce was the right choice. We weren't good together, not the way we were, but I'm grateful for what we have now. Co-parents who respect each other. A son who will grow up knowing both his parents love him. And you, Mom. I'm so grateful you're here." I leaned my head against his shoulder. This boy who had become a man, this son who had defended me when I needed it most, and then taught me how to extend grace when I wanted to hold on to anger. Your father would be proud of you, I said. You think so? I know so. He always said that the measure of a person isn't how they act when things are easy. It's how they act when things are hard. You could have been cruel to Vivian after what she did. You could have used the divorce to punish her. Instead, you chose kindness. I learned that from you. I smiled, watching Theo grab at a butterfly that danced just out of his reach. You learned that from both of us, your father and me. We're both in you, Julian. Always have been. We walked back to the patio together, where Dorothy was setting out plates for lunch. Sunday dinners had become a tradition over the past year, a weekly gathering that somehow included all of us. Julian, Vivian, Theo, Dorothy, and me. An unconventional family by any standard, but a family nonetheless. Father Marcus joined us when he could, bringing his gentle wisdom and his terrible jokes. He had officiated a small ceremony last month, a blessing of our strange little household, a recognition that families come in many forms. Vivian had cried through the whole thing, so had I. Before we eat, Vivian said, standing up from her chair, I want to say something. We all looked at her, curious. She wasn't usually one for speeches, preferring to show her feelings through actions rather than words. 1 year ago today was Theo's baptism, the day everything fell apart and started coming back together. She paused, collecting herself. I said terrible things that day. I did terrible things for years before that. I lied about who I was, where I came from, what I wanted. I hurt people who didn't deserve to be hurt. Dorothy reached for her daughter's hand. Vivian squeezed it briefly, then continued. But I'm not going to apologize again. I've apologized enough, and at some point apologies become meaningless. Instead, I want to make a promise. She looked directly at me. Eleanor, I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of the grace you've shown me. I don't know if I'll ever fully succeed, but I'm going to try every single day. I stood and walked around the table to where she waited. This woman who had called me a hag, who had tried to erase me from my grandson's life, who had built a marriage on lies and nearly destroyed my son. This woman who had also faced cancer with courage, rebuilt herself from nothing, and learned to be honest even when it hurt. I pulled her into a hug. She stiffened at first, still not entirely comfortable with physical affection, then relaxed into my arms. You're already worthy, I whispered. You have been for a while now. When we separated, both of us wiping our eyes, Julian raised his glass. To family, he said, whatever form it takes. To family, we echoed. Theo banged his sippy cup on the table, adding his own contribution to the toast. We laughed, all of us, the sound rising into the warm summer air. Later that evening, after Vivian and Dorothy had left and Julian was putting Theo to bed upstairs, I sat alone on my porch, watching the stars emerge. I thought about Theodore, about the life we had planned together, about all the years I had spent missing him. I wondered what he would think of all this, the empire I had built, the son I had raised, the daughter-in-law who had become something like a friend, the grandson who carried his name. I liked to think he would be proud. I liked to think he was watching somehow, smiling at the strange and beautiful family that had grown from the ashes of that terrible car accident so many years ago. My phone buzzed. A text from Vivienne. Thank you for today. Thank you for everything. I know I don't say it enough, but you saved my life. Not just during the cancer. Before that. By showing me what real love looks like. I typed back, you saved yourself. I just held the door open. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, her response came through. Good night, Grandma. Love you. I stared at those 2 words for a long time. Love you. 2 simple words that would have been impossible a year ago. 2 words that contained a whole universe of healing, forgiveness, and hope. Love you too, I wrote back. And I meant it. Despite everything, or perhaps because of everything, I meant it completely. I am Eleanor Castellan. I am 59 years old. I have buried a husband, built an empire, raised a son, survived a daughter-in-law who tried to destroy me, and helped that same woman fight her way back from cancer and deception to something resembling wholeness. My life has not been what I planned. It has been harder, stranger, more painful, and more beautiful than anything I could have imagined when I was a young seamstress dreaming of a different future. But sitting here on my porch, knowing that my son and grandson are sleeping safely upstairs, knowing that tomorrow I will see Vivian and Dorothy and Father Marcus and all the people who have become my family, I can say something I wasn't sure I would ever say again. I am happy, genuinely, completely, imperfectly happy, and that is more than enough.